mechanical, robotic, impersonal. These are descriptions therapists often have of CBT. Hear Hassam's story from a humanistic psychotherapist point of view. As a practitioner in the UK, he wasn't too thrilled with David Burns at first, and you'll hear David's response and how that reshaped Hassam's experience toward CBT and how warm it could be. Welcome to Talking Team CBT, where you'll hear stories from therapists and clinicians around the world on their journey and experience with Team CBT. Hi, I'm super excited about our interview today with Hassam. I just want to give you a heads up. The video will be a little glitchy because my internet wasn't acting quite right. So that was at my end, but the audio should be good, and I hope you will enjoy this interview.
Welcome to another edition of Talking Team with Angelo Poach and Daniel Herman. We're super excited today to introduce our guest. That is Hassam Mahmood from Pakistan, a psychotherapist who has his master's in counseling and psychotherapy, where he trained in the UK, member of the British Association of Psychotherapy, and is now working remotely, seeing clients both in Pakistan and UK, and is training in team. So welcome, Hassam.
Yeah, welcome.
Glad to be here. Thank you.
So we're super excited to have you join us, and love to hear a little bit as we get to know you a little bit. But maybe you could just kind of start by telling us a little bit more about yourself and when and how you got involved in team.
Right. So the introduction to team happened while I was doing my master's in the UK. And it was the pandemic, so I was listening to a lot of podcasts, I came across Feeling Good just by chance, and got really hooked because I had this idea of CBT being very impersonal, mechanical, robotic, and this was completely something different. And my master's was very humanistic. So I got kind of hooked on it, and long story short, I made a comment on one of the podcasts. I sent in an email, something that I didn't like. So I sent in an email to Dr. Burns saying that, I really love your podcast, but this, 1-day recovery thing that you've mentioned, that I don't feel that that's very accurate. I don't kind of believe in it. So I just put that out there and forgot about it, really. And I thought that obviously I won't get a reply. And even if I do, it would probably be a harsh one, right? He would probably say that, hey, you're just a trainee, you're doing masters, what do you know, right? And to my surprise, I did get an answer on the podcast live. I was just one day listening to a random podcast, and Rhonda says, here's Hassam from the UK asking about. I was sweating at that time that, oh no, what's going to happen? And wow, that was the winning moment, because that's where, Dr. Burns actually embodied all of the things that he talks about in terms of communication, right? So he did see the truth in it. He said that, yeah, it's not something that always happens. It was an exception, and I included it for that reason, that it had a powerful impact. But there's a lot of other techniques I use, and it varies. And so he was just really gracious in the way he replied, and that really won me over, that this person practices what he preaches. And at the end, he invited me to join Rhonda's Wednesday group. And I mean, that was really, really sweet. So that was the introduction. And it's been 1.5 years since I've been attending the Wednesday group. And every session is amazing. And I think it's a real privilege to be part of this community. It's a really, really supportive community. And team level 1 at the moment, working towards 2 and 3. Yeah.
That's super exciting. What a great story. I mean, I think that always surprises, when we're not expecting something positive to come out of it, especially, if we've given something that's maybe positively critical of something we've heard, and then we're like, uh-oh, what's he going to say? Here we go. And for him to actually practice what he preaches, that really aligned you to this model, thinking, hey, he's not just talking, other side of his mouth. He really believes what he's saying, because here he is practicing it and taking back something and finding the truth in what you had said. And I love that. And the 1-day recovery thing is something that comes up for my clients and other people's clients. And when I do trainings, it comes up. It's a very valid point that we don't want to be dismissive of work where, it takes time for the skills to really hone in and be a challenge. And we don't want to minimize, some of the instant recovery that we have too. So it's sort of this like balancing act of trying to navigate, how do we use the right language? Anyways, I don't want to keep going. I feel like I'm on a rant because I was pretty excited about what you said. So one thing I would love to hear about you is, you're pretty new at TEAM. Are there any other aspects of TEAM you found challenging?
That I found challenging to implement.
Yeah, or even the concepts. What about TEAM is like, I wonder about that.
Yeah, I think the most challenging one and the most meaningful one at the very beginning has been getting the feedback from clients at every session. And so, that wasn't part of my humanistic training. And at the very beginning, it seemed intimidating. And it also seemed like, trying to put into a questionnaire something that's very subjective, how you've experienced the relationship. And so I found that a bit challenging in the beginning, but that has been quite a game changer, because again, I thought that the clients would not be honest, or they would just but they're very honest. If they don't like something, they write it down. And then bringing that up and talking about it, talking through with them, that's been really, really cool. But the challenging part for me has been the most recent one has been, going over the mood surveys, which the client fills in before and after each session. Yes, I think I'm still working on making it more natural for me, because a lot of my training involves starting sessions in a very different way. So, but I see the value in it. I see that asking somebody, how are you, is a very vague, open-ended question, whereas the brief mood survey is like, easy to fill out a snapshot of how they are emotionally at that moment. And it's easy for them because they have all these words and ratings in front of them. And it's easy for me to start the session in a focused way.
That sounds so interesting. I love how you're kind of, bringing different aspects of psychotherapy and kind of working together with teams. So maybe you could tell us a little bit more, especially with your, humanistic, background, how you see, that approach kind of dovetailing together with team as you learn that, how that synergy is working for you and your clients.
Yeah, that's a very good point. And the one of the things that really attracted me about TEAM was that there was kind of this seamless integration possible from the humanistic background I had, at least for me personally. So my whole master's program was based on the work of Carl Rogers, and I really love his work, and I think he was quite a pivotal figure in the empathic humanistic movement. So when I did find out more about TEAM, and I understood all the concepts about, starting with empathy, having empathy throughout, being where the client is, not pushing anything on them, sitting with open hands, all of that made me think that this is the most non-directive kind of directive therapy that I have seen, and that's where I thought, okay, that's where the synergy is possible, and that's what attracted me, and that's what's been really, really useful, because at some points I do see that just my pure empathic humanistic approach sometimes has really, really good results, but then I have this whole other superpower waiting if they want to work on something very, very specific. So it feels very complete. It feels very complete.
I love hearing about the integration of different modalities. It's super important to team, and one of the things that's sometimes hard to express, and so I'm really glad you brought that up. It can be challenging because people just see, oh, it's CBT, and they kind of just lump it into that box. But it's so much more, and it's hard to explain that without just sounding like, I don't know. Sometimes I sound a little hokey when because I get really excited about team, and it's like to explain it, but you're nice and specific, and I think that. I loved what you said about it being the most non-directive therapy. I think I just love that line. It really makes sense. What you talked a little bit about this, but I mean, maybe there's another one. What really surprised you about team?
Yeah, I think one thing that I already did mention, I think, was the fact that the CBT I had experienced personally was completely something different, right? It was very impersonal. It was, you come in and you're just, tools are thrown at you kind of experience. So that was really surprising to me, that this was a very laid back, letting the process develop in the client, and until the client is there where they're ready for the work to begin, it's only then that you introduce the methods. The evaluation of therapy was surprising as well, right? So I was like, wow, that must take a very secure kind of personality to ask each client at every session, like, how did I do? And that, kind of asks you to shed that facade of the expert. And that's another thing that connects with your previous question, that how I saw the integration with my training and team, was that Rogers talked about it too, that, when I'm not the expert, when I'm just another human connecting, that's when change really happens. So yeah, finding all those really humanistic elements of empathy in CBT was really, really surprising and positively encouraging. And like you said, it's much more than CBT, right? It's CBT is just one part of the methods in team. It was more of the structure, and it was a very logical structure from going from empathy, agenda setting, into methods. I think there probably might be more things I'm missing. The concept of resistance was also very new to me, right? So that was a particularly interesting bit, right? I hadn't seen it in other cognitive therapy models in this particular way, so simplified with the concepts like magic dial and magic button. Yeah, so I'm not sure if that totally answered your question, but those were some of the things that really surprised me.
No, that definitely gives us a lot of kind of insight, and it's clear that you really came into this, and maybe that's part of a humanistic background, like just so kind of open and curious and ready to learn and be interested in some of these ideas. So also, curious, maybe if you could tell us a little bit, it sounds like it's kind of had a tremendous impact, just like it's had on all of us in our professional lives in terms of how we conduct therapy. But can you tell us a little bit, because I know personally, and true for many of us, that teams really kind of affected us, in our personal lives as well. So tell us a little bit like how team is kind of integrated into your personal life.
Yeah, I think once I started listening to the podcast, there were so this is, I think, very David Byrne specific, my answer here, rather than team specific, in the sense that there were lots of things that he would say on the podcast which were so profound and so insightful that in like a minute they would shift my perspective. And that was quite magical, right? So for instance, the whole concept of defining something, I remember that was the first thing that really resonated with me. It was a podcast in which he was discussing worthlessness, right? And he was talking about, okay, what makes a person worthless? And when it started, I was like, yeah, okay, that's seems like a valid question, whatever. But then he was talking about a client who said that I don't earn enough. And he was like, okay, so how much you need to earn to be worthwhile? And he was like, this much. And he said, okay, so $1 less, and then all your worth is gone. And when I was listening to it, I was, wow, right? So the really, really simple way in which he was saying this thing, these things helped me personally. So his insights in terms of when he was discussing case studies on the podcast, they helped me personally a lot. And now moving forward, when I am working in the team model with clients, there are epiphanies happening every now and then. So that continues. But the biggest moments happened during the podcast.
Yeah, and I mean, I would love for our listeners and viewers to definitely tune into David's podcast, and we'll definitely have that at the end. But it's feelinggood.com if you want to go to his website, or you can find it on iTunes. And there, I mean, the thing with the podcast is it's a bit of like, you might want to like jump around and look around and kind of have a feel for him, because there's some where it does feel a little more clinical. He's trying to describe something, and there's others where, like you said, he gets really deep and specific, you know, with somebody answering some of these Ask David questions. So there is a database if you want to search the Ask David questions for our viewers and listeners. Definitely can have a look at that and find some stuff that relates to you, some topics. So you know, it sounds like having those specific examples are very helpful for you, and I know for me those are really helpful too.
Yeah.
And it kind of gives us an idea of when we're working with clients, why we might offer suggestions. Like there's some tools where they lend themselves really well to offering suggestions. And I'm kind of, you know, you talked a little bit about this dropping the expert stance. And so there's this navigating like the expert or offering suggestions like you heard David doing, which can be really insightful to our patients. But then there's also this, well, hey, I'm not the expert. Let's see how you see it. How do you navigate those two concepts?
Yeah, that's a muscle to be kind of practiced and, you know, developed. And, you know, there's also this balance in team about, you know, accountability and keeping yourself a step back, and striking a balance between that. And I think that the congruence and authenticity that you bring as a person in the relationship, that's the bit where, you know, dropping the facade really helps. Like, I am a person in the relationship, just like David is David and has his own personality coming in. And, you know, when you're using the 5 secrets of communication, for instance, that David talks about, you could you can strike that balance, right? You can use I feel statements which are, you know, humanizing you, and you're authentically putting yourself out there as a human, but, you know, keep a check on not going so far as to being totally identified with the client, and then you know, not being of support in any way, and then you're too far away from that expert status, right? So I think, yeah, that's where I think the art aspect of therapy comes in. Like, exactly how do you balance that, right? So if I am sharing a feeling of disappointment or embarrassment, if I've let a client down, you know, I do it in a way where yes, I'm humanizing myself, but also not losing myself completely, where the client loses all confidence in me as a professional, right? So I think that's a muscle I'm still kind of developing. But yeah, that's a really, really subtle point that you raise.
So true, and it reminds us, right, that it's really, yeah, it isn't an art form, and David likes to remind us that team is fantastic and that it provides us a framework, but it's not a formula, and that art is still such a part of things. I was wondering if you could maybe just give us we have so many different parts of team, but one that's, you know, the M part, the methods. Maybe we could ask you just to tell us, you know, of all the different methods. Maybe tell us 1 or 2 that you've found intriguing or helpful with your clients.
Yeah, I think examine the evidence of a cognitive method that I think maybe goes back quite a while. It's one of the original ones, and it's still very effective. So I found that really good, especially for people who are very technically minded, very analytical, argumentative. It really works great. But the con of that, well, not exactly the con, it's unsuitable, I've found, for individuals who are obsessively doubting things. So like, intrusive thoughts or OCD, examine the evidence might actually work against them because they just get into that cycle. So I do find that even the methods I like, they work really well in some, they're like medicine in some aspects and poison in others, right? So the exam of the evidence is an example of that, like poison for OCD, medicine for other depressive thoughts. And one that I personally like very much that has an influence on me and clients is the double standard one, because I feel as soon as you realize that you're working with a compassionate person and you can really bring that side out of them through that method, it has quite a transformative effect. And finally, one last one I'd like to mention is the Socratic method, because I think that's a very widely applicable thing. It finds application in so many things. And yeah, Socrates was quite a genius himself. Yeah.
One final question for you, and that is, with all the therapists out there or students of me out there listening, what's one thing about TEAM you'd like them to know?
Yeah, I think what I'd like them to know about TEAM is that it's been developed in a way where it's a very flexible framework. So, it kind of invited me in from a humanistic background. It invites other people from psychodynamic and all these other frameworks. So in that sense, it's very accessible. And that's one thing that I'd really like people to know, that, once you start looking into it, once you just have a little bit of openness to explore it, you'd see that, how much value you can bring to the framework from your own modality. So that's really one thing that I'd really want to share. And the other would be the evidence, right? So, David Burns is a scientist as well, right? So he has approached it as a science, and he has looked at the evidence. He has done the research, why testing matters, why empathy matters, what works, and how to optimize the therapeutic approach best. So he's always looking for things that waste the least amount of time, gets to the core of the problem as early as possible. So especially if therapists out there are interested in rapid change, then this is really great, because I've come across clients who came to me and said that we've been going to therapy for 3 years, in which the therapist is really trying to tell us that there's a childhood unresolved issue that's your problem, and they tell me that we're telling the therapist it's not that, it's just this current thing, I'm shy, like try to help me with that. And I found that just getting specific has been such a empathic experience for them. Like when I actually focus in on that one element, which is again a big part of TEAM, that you get very focused on a specific thing, clients actually really love it. In my experience, they're like, wow, finally someone who is listening to the specific thing I want to work on and is not pushing a theory on me. And sometimes they've even said that therapists don't agree when we say that this isn't the answer. Therapists tell them that no, it's just that you're not admitting it. Right. So that has been painful to hear, that clients have been through that experience. So I'd really want to know people that, TEAM is structure backed by research, evidence. It's aimed at getting therapy as efficient, as optimized as possible. And it focuses in a very, very specific way on what the client needs. So those elements I feel are really important.
Go ahead, Daniel. Why don't you wrap?
Yeah, I was going to say this has been just such a fascinating interview and getting to know you, Hassam, and hearing about your journey into team and integrating humanistic and other aspects of psychotherapy, and to hear about the fantastic work that you're doing both in Pakistan as well as in the UK. And people can then find you. I think you mentioned on Psychology Today, or where else can they find you if they want to connect with you?
Yeah, you can search on Psychology Today or Counseling Directory UK. And also I can share my website with Angela and she can maybe put that up as well. There's a form to contact me there. It also has a blog post that outlines my journey of getting into team. So yeah, I'd love to connect with people who are interested in this kind of approach, whether they're colleagues or clients looking for therapy.
That's great. We will definitely put your website in the description, in the YouTube description. And if you're listening on the podcast, you can head over to the YouTube channel and see the links there. Well, thank you so much, Hassam, for doing this interview with us. And we're super excited. We learned more about you and more about team and how it can be integrated in humanistic and Rogerian theories, which are all very important. So thank you for being with us today. And thank you to all our listeners. And tune in next time as we keep exploring team.